Hey guys, thank you for joining me. My name's Viktoria Haack, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about social media. So these days, in 2020, more than half of the world's population are using social media. So it's becoming increasingly important to get your name out there, but also from a business and marketing point of view. But it can be confusing navigating the different platforms. Trying to generate interest in what you're creating, trying to kind of create a following, but at the same time staying true to your own personal vision and kind of not selling out for likes and that kind of stuff. So in this presentation, I'm going to just talk you through how I personally navigate the world of social media. So a few years ago, when I was just starting my photography business, I went to a presentation on social media for business. And the one thing that really stuck out for me was that word of mouth was the best possible way to generate business. And so we were encouraged to think of social media as word of mouth, but on a global scale. So this is something that I have always come back to with my social media. So there are obviously a whole bunch of different platforms out there. The ones that I tend to use mainly are Instagram and Facebook. And I'm going to, for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to talk mainly about Instagram, but you can apply much of what I'm saying kind of across the different platforms. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is think about what the purpose is of your social media. So why are you actually there? Excuse me. So for me, I started using social media when I lived on a small island in the UK. So it was quite an isolated place. I picked my camera up to start shooting for the first time in a few years, and I was taking all these photographs, but I didn't really have a purpose to them. You know, I was taking them for myself, but I didn't really have anyone to share them with. So I started using social media, and it was a great way to actually share my creativity, and it really gave me a purpose for actually shooting. So my main reason for being on social media has always been from a creativity point of view. So I wanted to share my work. I wanted to get feedback from other people, and I was kind of learning how to be a photographer, looking at other people's work as well. So I was also finding inspiration from other photographers. So that was my main reason. But also I wanted to connect with other artists. Living on this island, you know, I didn't really have other like-minded people to share my photography with and other artists. So I wanted to connect. So it was a really great place to be social. But also, whilst I'm using social media, I am also aware that this is an opportunity for me to engage with people who could potentially become my clients. So being aware that you're kind of, you know, you're being watched. These are possible clients that you could be working with as well. And also, it's a great place to connect with brands and companies. So those are the reasons that I'm using social media. So maybe have a think about, why are you actually there? So analytics and insights. This can be a great place or these can be great tools to find out how your images, for example, are performing on social media. To be perfectly honest, I don't pay a huge amount of attention to the analytics and insights, but they are useful. You can find out the times of day that your followers are most active. You can find out where they're located, what the demographics of your followers are. So it can be a useful place, and it can be a great way, knowing what the demographic of your followers are, you can then always, try to change that, or, it can be a useful tool. So how often and when should you post? Well, I know from my analytics that my followers are generally more active in the earlier part of the day, kind of the earlier to the middle part of the day. But I don't actually post at that time because when I post, I like to be able to interact with any image that I've posted for at least half an hour, because I feel like when you interact with it, it also pushes it up a little bit higher in the algorithm. So I think this very much depends on you. When does it suit you to post? You can also use third-party, apps and things like Hootsuite to do posts for you. But I like to be able to interact with the images that I've posted. So I choose to post kind of in the late afternoon and early evening. It's obviously not always, you're having a busy day. You may not be able to make that regular post. I like to try and post once a day if I can, because I also feel that the more you interact with the platform, the algorithm seems to push you higher. So I like to make a post once a day. But obviously, if you're having a busy day, it's pretty difficult to always post that regularly. So what I will do is, if I have a spare evening during the week, I'll maybe spend an hour putting a bunch of posts together, just preparing them, and I'll put them into my draft. So they're sitting there ready to go with a little bit of text with them. I've maybe already tagged them in different ways. So they're pretty much ready to go, and that can save me quite a bit of time. So then how do you choose which images to post? And for me, this is, personally, social media is a place where you can become known for a certain kind of image, and you can get kind of stuck in a box where your followers will like certain things because they're following you for those images. And for me, I'm really keen to not be put in that box. I'm always trying to extend the parameters of that box so that I can pretty much post whatever I want to post. Without really thinking about it too specifically, this is more intuitive, but I was thinking about it for this presentation. There are three kind of key things that I think about when I'm going to make a post. So if I divide them into those three categories, one is inspiration. So those are images that might be ones that would be on, for example, on my website. So there would be ones that I know will be fairly well liked. So those would come under the inspiration category. Then there are those images that I would put under the connection category. So those are images that when I make the post to social media, they usually will create more engagement. So people will, engage with them more, maybe share them more, and there will be more conversation. And then there are those images that I would classify as images that allow me to grow personally with my art. So those are images that probably wouldn't get the number of likes that maybe are not quite so expected from me. And so I'll balance those out. If I post an image that I would classify as kind of personal growth, I might follow it with one that's going to make more connection, just to kind of balance it out, but always pushing the parameters of what I can post on social media. So I'm going to show you a few examples of those kinds of images. So for inspirational ones, these would probably come under that category. And then images that I would classify as being more kind of connection. And then personal growth. So how do you think of captions for your images? For me, this is fairly intuitive. I don't really think about it a huge amount, but I usually say something about the image. So something, maybe about, for example, just for this image that I'm showing right now. So this is a rescue kitten. So a little bit of information about the image. And I might, for example, if I've put that into my drafts ready to post, when I actually come to posting it on the day, I will always, if I'm feeling a certain way, or if there's something happening, in the local environment that ties it into that particular day, I may very well change that caption or add something to that caption so that it's more relevant to people on the day. So I'm often asked what my biggest piece of advice would be for social media. And it is to respond to your followers and be authentic. I can't stress that enough. I personally feel that if you put an image out there and people take the time to make a comment about it and you don't respond to them, it's kind of rude. So if people are taking time out of their day to leave a comment on one of my images, then I will always try and respond to that. And I think that if you think about this, if you go back to social media as word of mouth on a global scale, people are less likely perhaps to book a workshop with you or to book a shoot with you, a family shoot or a wedding, or, if you don't bother to respond to them, you're kind of telling them quite a lot about who you are. So I think responding to your followers in as authentic a way as possible is one of the biggest things that I could suggest. So I also feel that if you put something out in the public forum, you shouldn't necessarily expect everybody to just like it. I feel, that if somebody wants to make comments about it that they love it, they have the right to do that. And I think you should always try and take those comments in the light of constructive criticism, and respond to them knowing that the world is watching your responses too. So I keep that in mind. And it's inevitable that you will have people that will just be negative. It happens. And often in those situations, I see it as a way of just kind of exercising, I can't think of the word, sorry. But when you do get those negative responses, I think it's a great way to, sometimes you can just kind of leave the reply blank and your followers will actually step in and defend you. Or if you're really kind of pushed, you can obviously block people if they're just, kind of internet trolls. Something I have found that I've done in the past as well is that if, for example, I have an image that's maybe of a model or of somebody that's not me, and there are people just kind of bashing them for no reason, I will watch the comments and delete a comment that I think could be hurtful to that particular person. And I have occasionally turned comments off overnight because I know I can't sit there and monitor them. So that's something else that you can do as well. But I do think that how you respond is pretty important. So as your account grows, I think it's important to think kind of longer term. So even if your account is small, even if you only have, 100 followers, I think it's really important to think as though you're bigger than that. So for example, I think it's important that you don't necessarily name the locations of certain places, particularly if they're sensitive natural habitats. If you only have 100 followers, you've got potentially 100 people that can go to that place and then possibly trash it. But if you have 100,000 followers, that's a whole lot of people that can do a lot of damage. So I think just being responsible about things like naming places. And in the current climate with COVID-19, for example, I think it would be obviously wrong of me with people that, the number of people that follow my account to be, promoting, going distances to take photos and that kind of stuff. I think you need to be responsible. And I also think that even though your account may be small, you should think about who you potentially partner with in terms of perhaps businesses that approach you that are willing to pay for you to market their content. And it's very easy to be drawn into, when people are offering you money, to be drawn into perhaps working with companies that are really not something that you should be aligning with in your long term. So I have always tried to think long term, tried to not necessarily partner with businesses that in the long term, I'm glad that I haven't done. So think about that. And another great way of using social media and Instagram specifically is Instagram stories. So obviously one of the good things about them is that they only last for 24 hours. So it's a really good place to test out things. They're not going to sit on your main page. And if it doesn't work, it's only 24 hours, and obviously you can delete them as well, but it's a good place to test things out. It's also a really good place to allow people to connect with you, to kind of show them a little bit of your personal life. And I tend to keep my family fairly private, but I share stuff about my dog, so that kind of makes me a bit more accessible. And I think people connect with that too. You can show the behind the scenes of things like workshops and different shoots that you might be doing, or travel. And again, it helps people to kind of connect with your brand. And it's a good place to kind of create the community that you want to be involved with. Something that I've been doing on a Friday is something I've called a Feature Friday. So I'm, as I mentioned earlier, I'm very inspired by the work of other artists, and seeing their work often inspires me to try different things. And I thought it might be a nice idea to share some of their work. And I think by doing that, not only are you kind of giving to the community and, maybe helping out those other photographers by bringing them up in people's feeds and stuff, but I'm also, my followers are seeing different types of art and different types of photography. And it's also expanding the possible kind of borders of my own box, if you like. So if I then decide I want to try and do some photography in a similar style, they've already seen that kind of thing. I'm kind of expanding everybody's awareness of different types of images. So that can be a great thing. And also some of those photographers will also share the post in my story that I've made. So that also helps to extend my reach. And you can obviously make money from your Instagram stories in the same way that you can from your main Instagram post too. So companies will pay you usually less than an Instagram main post, but they will also work with you to pay you for promoting some of their content there. So how can you drive traffic to your page? For me, it's always about being social and connecting with others, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. So finding and using relevant hashtags is one of them. And what I will often do or have done in the past is if I have an image that is a certain style and I'm not sure what hashtags to use, I might look around on Instagram, find something that's similar and see what kind of hashtags they've used. And then I'll make a note of them and I'll put them into the notes on my phone under, for example, the title of wilderness hashtags or dog hashtags or portrait hashtags. And so then when I'm making a post, it's much faster. I can just go into my notes in my phone, copy and paste, and add them to the post. When I'm making the post as well, I will often tag other accounts. So for example, I might choose to tag businesses that I might want to work with, but also I might tag hubs. And for those of you who don't know what those are usually accounts that have quite a large following, and they share the work of other artists with credit. So they're a great way of kind of, getting your work out into the community. You could partner with other social accounts. So if you have a friend who's a landscape photographer or a portrait photographer, you can kind of big each other up, you can shout each other out and just mutually kind of push each other up. Contests and giveaways are another great way to kind of build your traffic to the page. You could give away a print or free wallpapers, or you could partner with a business and give something away in that respect. And I also have a couple of other accounts that I use. One of them is for my dog, and I find that if you have other accounts, they can kind of reciprocate with each other and push each other up together. So, if I make a post on my main account or I feature Jack in my stories, I'll tag him on his account. I'll put in his stories that I've made a post on my main account. So these two are both kind of feeding off of each other. And of course, you can sponsor your posts too. And I think that if you think about what you may spend on, perhaps advertising on the radio or advertising in a newspaper or something, it can be, think of it as an investment, sponsoring posts and making sure that they become visible perhaps to people that wouldn't otherwise have seen them can be a fairly good idea as well. So what type of content works best for engagement? And I think this is an ever-changing situation on social media and probably different for every artist. But I know for me, the posts that seem to work the best at the moment are ones that are kind of multifaceted and there's more than one image. So it may be that it's a multiple post, so there might be 10 images, or it could be that I make a post and then I post the metadata of my camera settings and things with it, or I post some of the behind the scenes to that image as well. So I'll show you a couple of examples of kind of multiple posts that work quite well. So this is a post with 10 different images, all to do with people and their four-legged companions. And then for this post, I showed the behind the scenes of the setup for this image. So Instagram filters. For those of you that may not be aware of what those are, when you make a post on Instagram, you have the facility to add an Instagram filter to the post. So that could be just kind of bumping up saturation, or it could be contrast or brightness. There are a bunch of different filters that are available as you actually make the post. I don't tend to use them that much, but I know that some people feel that by adding an Instagram filter, you're possibly more likely to then be pushing your image up in the algorithm. So it's something to think about. And you can add that filter at just 1% if you don't really want to change the look of your image, but you want to kind of jump in on that. You can just add the filter, but at just a tiny percentage. So how do you keep current? For me, this is pretty much all about my gut instinct. So really with my social media, most of it comes down to kind of my gut instinct. So I post what I feel will be right, and I kind of act the way I feel I should act. So listen to your gut instinct. I do pay attention to different trends. Sometimes there are trends with images, and I don't want to be part of that trend, because obviously trends disappear, but I do like to know what the trend is, and I might just take a tiny element of that and use a little bit of it, but I do like to kind of notice them. And I also I notice things like, for example, at the moment TikTok is obviously something that's pretty big, just noticing those things. So knowing that short videos to music are something that people are enjoying. Noticing trends is a good thing to do, I think, with social media. Paying attention to other accounts. So if you notice that another account is kind of growing exponentially, so why is that? So maybe having a look at what they might be doing, and learning from them. Trying to stay on top of new features within the platform. Sometimes I'll notice some kind of new feature. I don't necessarily know how to use it, but then I might just go and Google it to figure out how to use it. But I think it's fairly important to stay on top of those kind of things as well. And I do watch the occasional educational tutorial on social media and stuff. They're not always super useful, but even if you just glean one thing from it, it can be quite handy. And the thing that I just keep on harping on about is really kind of engaging with people and being sociable and responding as well are key things. So really coming back to the beginning of this, I would encourage you to think about, when you're making a post, 3 words to focus on. So I mentioned the 3 words that I think about. So mine are inspiration, connection, and personal growth. So maybe think about coming up with 3 words that would help you with the direction of your social media. And remember why you're here. So coming back to that. For me, it's always about connection, and it's always about creativity. So those are the reasons why I'm using social media. And finally, thank you so much for listening and watching. If you guys have any questions or comments, I would be more than happy to hear from you. So feel free to message me on social media or send me an email. So thank you again, and stay safe out there.